Hello there, welcome to this first edit, which is going to be of this studio portrait of this man, and I'm sure you must by now know how to get your hands on it so you can open this up in Photoshop also. Now, when I say this is an easy edit, okay, what do I mean by easy when it comes to selections? Okay, so we have to understand 2 points which actually make a selection edit challenging. So let's look at what those 2 factors are. So anytime we are dealing with a challenging selection, okay, the things that make it challenging are these 2 factors. Less contrast between the subject and the background. So just remember this because we are soon going to go back to Photoshop and look at that image that we just saw with respect to this. Less contrast between subject and background, and soft edges. Okay, so I'm talking about the edges on the subject. Edges are everything when it comes to selection. This is what makes selections tough to do or easy to do. Okay, so 2 things here. Okay, and certain images, like for example in this course we take a level-based approach, right? So we start from easier selections and then we will gradually move on to images which are very challenging. So those images will have both these issues, okay, that you're going to have less contrast and you're also going to have soft edges. Right now the image that we have open, it doesn't have either of this. That's why it's easy. Let's try to understand this by going back to Photoshop and seeing these 2 factors there. So if you look at this image, okay, first of all, what do I mean by contrast? So you can clearly see here, okay, by the way, I'll keep mentioning few important shortcuts as and when we go along. So for example, if you want to zoom in and zoom out, okay, this is something we'll often have to do. You can simply you can hit this tool here, or if I just hover over this, you can see that you can also press the Z or the Z key on your keyboard, and then you get this plus icon, and then you can click on your mouse or hold down your tablet to zoom in and out. Okay, so first of all, what about the contrast here between the subject and the background? Since this is a studio portrait, usually in studio portraits contrast is not a problem, because if the colors are different between the subject and the background, there is enough contrast. For example, here you can see, yes, you can clearly see the boundary and the edges. Why? Because it's a white background, he's wearing a dark suit here. Would have been an issue if he was not wearing this blazer. If he had this shirt on, this would have been a challenging image. But here we only have to deal with that part when it comes to this, the sleeve here, okay? This is going to be slightly challenging because now you can see, yes, between this, the contrast between the subject and the background only in this small area is kind of less. So this part is going to be challenging. The rest of the parts you can see overall are going to be easy. So the first factor, contrast, is definitely not a problem, so it makes it easy. It makes it easier because the second part also is in our favor. What was the second part? Soft edges. Okay, so anytime a subject has soft edges, it's going to become more challenging to accurately select. The opposite of soft edges are hard edges. And if you look at the edges on this subject throughout from top to bottom, we only are dealing with hard edges. So usually the body in portraits, for example, will be, because the people are usually wearing clothes or, you know, whatever. I mean, it's going to be an outline of the body or the cloth. So it's going to be hard edge. The problem usually comes in the head area. Okay, that's because a lot of people will have hair. And when you have hair, you have strands. Okay, that automatically will make the edges softer. Why? Because those are very subtle in nature, like small strands of hair. Here, since this guy is bald, and I purposely chose that image, okay, so that we have both these points in our favor, even his head is hard-edged, right? So it's going to be very easy for us to make the selection. So both those points are in our favor. So you're going to see that in such images, where both these factors work for us, with just a simple one-click method, we will be able to select this person. I'm going to be showing you that method slightly later on, because since this is the first edit, another thing that I want to do right now is walk you through some of the selection tools, okay, which we actually won't really be using throughout this course, but are present in Photoshop and were actually important 7 to 8 years back when things were not so automatic or automated like they are right now. What are these tools? So most of the selection tools are on this left panel here. 1 or 2 selection tools, some of the very important selection tools, are also in this select menu. The name itself suggests that, okay? We're going to be looking at all these. First of all, let's look at some very basic tools which we won't really be using too much, okay, which are too manual in nature or too rigid in nature. One of the tools that is very rigid in nature is this first tool that you get here, which is called as the rectangular marquee tool. For this, as the name suggests, anytime you want to open up the panel inside a panel, you just have to press this slightly longer, okay? So you get inside it, you get different options. So the first one is this one, rectangular, which simply means I can make a selection which is rectangular or square. Basically, it's completely up to me. I can even change a lot of things like the width and the height of this to, make the selection exactly what I want. But from a photography point of view or from a photographer's point of view, this is too rigid. We hardly will be making a selection which is like this, okay? Similar to this is the elliptical marquee tool, which is kind of similar, but basically is dealing with this. So anytime you see these things, they are referred to as the marching ants. Why? Because they look like ants which are marching. But they basically mean that this is a selection. Okay? So right now, anything inside this is a selection. For example, just let's test this out. If I was to now press simply delete, okay? So not right now, I'll just have to unlock this layer to show you this, okay? So just unlock this. Now if I press delete, can you see anything inside this has got deleted? Similarly, if I hit undo, which is you can do by Control Z or Command Z, like this, okay? I can always go up to the select menu and even select the outside area. So this time, if I go to select and I select inverse, which is something we will be using a lot in this course, okay? If I do this, just notice the difference here in the marching ants, okay? Hit inverse, the opposite gets selected. Now if I hit delete, the opposite happens, right? But the point is, yes, we get a round selection, either inwards or outwards. That is up to you. I'm going to hit Control Z, Command Z to undo. And one very important shortcut, which you should know when we are dealing with selections, is to get rid of these marching ants. Suppose we've done our job and we want to get rid of these marching ants, you will be pressing Control D or Command D. Okay, so together it's going to get rid. So after we're done with our selection job, we will be usually pressing Control D, Command D, just going through some of the basics that you should know of, okay? There are other two things which are called here as single row marquee tool, single column. We don't even touch that because we're kind of dealing with literally a pixel of selection with these tools. You're not going to be using this. You're not even going to be using these two anytime soon. These are actually more geared towards graphic designers. They usually need to use stuff like this more. If you go down, we have something called as a lasso tool, okay? Lasso tool is basically something where you just draw the selection manually. So for example, if I take on the challenge and I say, you know what, I'm going to manually make the selection of this person. Can we do that? Absolutely not, right? Simply not possible. No matter how much we zoom in, we will not be able to get an accurate selection like this. Okay, so it's really, again, one of the tools we don't use too much in selecting the subject. However, as you're going to find out in this course, the lasso tool does play an important part in removing from selections. Okay, so when we do make some accurate selections using some more automated and accurate tools later on, sometimes what will happen is even those tools can do a wrong job. Maybe they can add some part of the selection which was not there. In that case, if we just need to remove a small part of the selection, we can use the lasso tool. Let me give you an example of this, okay? Quick example. One of the automated tools, which we'll see later, right now I'm just showing this to show you, is to go to select menu. And these days we have a very convenient tool here called select subject. It's an AI-based tool, okay? And basically that kind of, if you're getting confused with that term, just means to think of it like an advanced way by which Photoshop comes to know what the subject is. Okay, I'll be talking more about this later on because this is something we'll be using a lot. But you can see, just with one click of that, we've got a perfect selection. But let's say, for some reason, okay, the selection that we got right now was, okay, now I did something, don't worry about that, but I basically added to the selection. I'll just tell you how I did that. But let's say this was the result that Photoshop gave us. Now we know that, yeah, this looks pretty much perfect except for this part. So what we can do now is, we can zoom in, and one of the things we can do is, we can take the lasso tool, because this is a small part, we can still draw this manually. What we can do is, if we hold down Alt or Option, okay, so anytime you're using a selection tool, if you hold down Alt or Option, just see what happens to the cursor. Keep an eye. So I'm pressing now. You see there's this minus sign that comes in. It's telling us now whatever I do here is going to remove from the existing selection. So now I can do something like this. It still won't be very accurate, and that's why we don't still use the lasso tool even in situations like this, but just sometimes it will be used. Okay, so you can see I've removed from the selection. And to show you this example, remember I did something by which it added. That's the opposite of the Alt Option method. When you need to add to an existing selection, you hold down the Shift key. So if you hold down the Shift key, can you see this time is plus? So think of them as two siblings. Alt is minus, Shift is plus. Shift adds, Alt removes. So this time I'm holding down Alt, and I can remove this. Okay, so the lasso tool is used, but usually for localized problems like this. Even though, to be frank, there are much better solutions than what we did with the lasso tool also. So practically not of too much use. It's a very manual tool. Then we have, so I'm just going to hit Control D, Command D to get rid of this. Okay, let's talk about some other tools also. So inside this menu, same, again, we are still on the lasso tool menu. We also have the polygonal lasso tool, which is similar to the lasso tool since it's in the same family. But what this does is, just see, if I press my mouse, okay, I'm actually using a tablet, but sometimes I might just say I'm using a mouse, okay, just to keep things simple. Though later on, you're going to actually find out the tablet is sometimes, I won't say required, but it does a better job when it comes to selection. But we are nowhere near that part in this course. That is going to come later when we have more challenging selections, okay? But what this tool does is, now, let's say I draw, it kind of just gives you a straight line, okay? Now, if I just hit once more, it kind of stitches that. Then I can keep going like this. I can keep pressing, and like this. I can make any selection, and I need to close this to form the selection, okay? So you can kind of see it's a straight edge tool. Usually, it can be more beneficial in things like, when you're selecting which has a straight edge, maybe like a house, maybe like a wall, something like that, okay? Though, to be frank, there also, if the edge is clear and hard, the tools that I'm going to be showing you later on, the automated tools like the one we saw in the select menu, they will still do a better job than anything that requires manual effort. So we don't even use the polygonal lasso tool. But you should know that, yes, okay, lasso but straight edged or straight lined lasso tool is what the polygonal lasso tool is, okay? Now, some of the tools that we will be using are in the next family. So if I just here, under the quick selection tool menu, if I long press this, we have a couple of tools here. I'm going to be talking about the object selection tool later on, okay? One of the tools that is very, very important in Photoshop and has been important despite a lot of automated changes that have come is the quick selection tool. This is something we will be using, okay? What this means is, so let me just zoom out a bit, okay? You get this cursor, okay, and you can't see that. So increase the size of this, just like you do it for a brush. In Photoshop, anytime you need to increase the size of your cursor or the tool that you're using, you can hold down, either you can change the size from here, okay? You can change the hardness also, this is something we'll be doing later on. But the shortcut for increasing or decreasing the size is pressing the square bracket keys on your keyboard, okay? Near the backspace key, you will find it. So the right square bracket key increases the size, left square bracket key decreases the size, okay? Usually when we're working with this tool, it's kind of a good idea to make it slightly smaller so that it selects the edges properly, okay? So you'll kind of get used to it. There's no real science behind it, okay? Just don't use something so big, which is bigger than your subject. That's all, and that's kind of common sense, okay? So this just, how it works is if I click the mouse and keep dragging, it starts to notice where is that contrast between what I'm painting on or what I'm selecting, and wherever it sees that contrast on the edges, it stops. So basically, it detects edges well, and accordingly, it keeps on. As you keep pressing your mouse, you can just increase the selection like this. You can keep increasing, and you can see it automatically kind of hugs that area where the contrast is more, okay? And it keeps on flowing where the contrast is less. Like between his jacket, the black jacket, the contrast is less, right? So we can keep on adding. And can you see, if I increase the size here, automatically it shows the plus icon. Now can you guess, kind of a small homework for you, how can this tool work if I have to reduce from the selection? We've already done this before. So I'm going to press Alt or Option. So if I do that, it turns into a minus, and then if I do, it starts to take away from it. So actually, if you see, this approach would have been better in that problem that we faced earlier on, rather than using the lasso tool, because there, it'll just hug the blazer, okay, instead of us having to draw it manually. So sometimes these selection tools will be used together. One tool will not be able to do things. We'll refine the things by using another tool. Okay, in this case, I'm back to, I've let go of the Alt Option key. I'm adding things back again. You can also, if you don't want to hold down Alt Option, can you see here? You also can select minus, which then becomes the default. And now if I press Alt Option, the opposite happens. It actually turns into, so no, you'll have to press the Shift key. Okay, so sometimes even I forget things. But usually the default is that you just let it be on plus, because usually you'll be using this to add something. And it's just, since the removing part is usually lesser, it's okay to sometimes just hold down Alt and Option and reduce from something. That's the kind of default. Shift to add all to things, or you can change the defaults by selecting this. Okay. We also have something, so I'm going to get rid of this. Again, a small homework for you was the shortcut to get rid of the marching ants. Control or Command D. Okay, so you'll get used to this. You keep on doing. So bread and butter of making selections. Also, let's see some other options here. Like I said, I'll treat this later on. The other one is the Magic Wand tool. This used to be very famous in Photoshop around, like up till I would say 2012, 2013, before the really automated tools started to kind of dominate Photoshop. Because what this tool used to do was, I just needed to press with this. I can just like press this, and it tries, kind of is doing the same thing what we did with the quick selection tool. It's noticing the difference in contrast, okay? But with just one click, we don't have to drag our mouse. But as you can see, it doesn't select everything. So we actually have to tell it, there's this option here which says tolerance. If I increase the tolerance, what we're telling it is, listen, I'm clicking here. That doesn't mean that you just stop. So right now what it did was, since I kind of clicked somewhere on its head, it noticed the color of the pixels there. And whatever was similar is trying to take that in the selection. But if we tell it that, listen, I'm kind of giving you more liberty. I'm saying 64. So now when I hit, try to get more of this, like this. So this time, can you see it has taken more? I say, no, listen, it's still less. I want more of it. So I say, okay, maybe 100. Increase the tolerance. Boom. So now we'll start to get even more. But then what the problem with this tool is, first of all, you can see it still misses out because here is totally different than what we clicked on. So I'll again have to hold down Shift and click here also. Then click here also. Then click here also. And basically, can you see now what it did was, the tolerance was so much, just by those extra clicks, it actually selected the whole of the canvas. So this, for this reason, okay, in a light-hearted way, photographers refer to this as the tragic wand tool, okay? So it doesn't really do a very good job. But earlier on, in the earlier days, 10 to 15 years back, this was one of the go-to tools because the quick selection tool wasn't that good. Once the quick selection tool started to observe Adobe people made it good in quality, started to notice the difference in the contrast, this kind of became the go-to tool, okay? Now, recently, a couple of years back, one more sibling has been added to this family, which is a very handy tool, which we'll be using, a lot of times in this course, which is the object selection tool, okay? So if I hold this, now what this does is, instead of us having, for example, in the quick selection tool, we have to drag all over, right? Now, in this case, it kind of makes it slightly easier because what I have to do is, for example, let's say I want to select this person's face, okay? What I just need to do is, with this tool selected, I just need to draw a border around this whole area, like this. And I'm kind of telling Photoshop now, listen, look for something which stands out from the remaining things, okay? And what you're going to see is it's selected that face. Okay, let's try it somewhere else. Let's say we only want to select the hand here. What I can do is do this, and we can, sometimes it just takes a bit of time to render, but can you see? And don't worry about that pink thing that is coming. I'll tell you later on what that means, okay? It's not too important. But basically, wherever you draw that box, inside it, it looks for something which is different from other things, and it selects that. A lot of times, this can be very, very handy. Is it the most important tool? No, not really. A lot of times the quick selection tool will do a better job than the object selection tools. But a lot of times this will be faster when we need to add or remove any particular thing, because you can do the same thing here. Just notice if I press down Alt Option, it turns into minus. If I press Shift, it turns into plus. So we can quickly add or remove something also. Okay, I'm going to hold down Control D, Command D to deselect that. Let's quickly look at some other tools which we won't be using. One of the tools that is popular or definitely was very popular in this row, if you keep going down, is the pen tool. Okay, this was the go-to tool for a lot of people. Why? Because it allows you to draw manual selections. It is kind of similar to what we saw with the polygon or lasso tool. Okay, but you have more control with this. So what you do with the pen tool is similar to what you did with the lasso tool. Okay, you hit a point and then you keep drawing what we call as a path. Okay, again, this is probably not the best example for this image, but where this is superior to the polygonal lasso tool is, in that tool you can only go straight, but here, if before hitting or before clicking my mouse, okay, so right now I click the mouse but I don't leave it, okay, that's the trick. So if I don't leave it, because I need to make a curve, right, the slightly curved, so if I click but I don't leave, I can then move around to kind of exactly form an angle of the selection also, like this, okay, like this, and then continue. Like right now I'm not going to showing you, I'll not be showing you how this tool works, because first of all, there are two reasons for that. One is that it's again one of those very manual tools where you need to go through things. And the second reason for this is it's still not used in situations which are challenging, because this only works when you have defined edges. We will be having one image later on in this course, okay, where we have hard edges on an object, and I'll be using this pen tool there. I'll be telling you exactly how to use this tool, but there also, after we've done with the pen selection, I'll be showing you a much more automated way of doing the same things, which basically means the pen tool is pretty much not of any use. Even though it was one of the most important tools, it's not used too much these days. Again, it's manual. Okay, so even if you never learn the pen tool, it's not the end of the world. Okay, but we will see it later on. So these were some of the selection tools here on this left-hand side. Okay, now one of the tools that we already saw before, which we will definitely be using, is perhaps right now one of the best tools, is when you simply go to the select menu and you click on select subject. Photoshop does the whole job for you. Okay, so it's going to just take a bit of time and boom, you get this perfect selection. Now, why do you get the perfect selection? Is it just because we're using an automated tool which is based on artificial intelligence? Kind of, yes, but also remember, because this is an easy selection, because both the factors are in our favor. Will it always do such a good job as you're going to find out? No. There is a lot of times when this won't do a very good job, but it'll still do a better job than having to do anything manually. So still your best bet. And then from there on, we'll have to refine the selection, which is the main kind of the core of this course, which will come later, how to refine the selections, okay? Some of the other tools here are like you can select a focus area. So Photoshop will look at what's in focus and it's going to try to, keep basically this whatever, like for example, if you click something, the things which go, in the blur, right? So let's say, for example, if you're using like in the shot in front of you, you can see that this is a shot which you click at a shallow depth of field, right? When you use a wider aperture like f1.8, where even like the subject's hair or some other parts can go out of focus. And what that does is basically reduces the contrast. It blurs the contrast between the background and the subject wherever the subject is blurred out. Anytime something reduces the contrast, that's one of the factors which makes the selection more challenging, right? So it's not only always because the contrast of the color difference. Even blurring things can reduce the contrast between the subject and the background. So something like this, later on can help us. We'll see an example of this if required. But to be frank, we don't really use this too much. Because even if your part of your subject is blurred out, there are much better ways to detect that contrast and make a selection. Okay. Then you have things like sky, which we'll probably see. There will be one image at least on landscape selections. Okay, there we might use sky because it will automatically detect and select the sky, and you can remove and replace the sky. One of the things that I do want to show you right now is, if I just hit Control D, Command D to deselect this, is color range. Okay, so if I hit color range here, what this, as the name suggests, is we can actually make a selection based on color. So, for example, I want to tell Photoshop, listen, I want to select this background, which is kind of grayish in color. Okay, so I just need to, once this tool opens up, I just need to click my mouse somewhere. And can you see you get something like this? Now, if you're familiar with layer masks, and I'm going to be talking about layer masks very soon, okay? What you're seeing here is nothing but a layer mask, or what would be a layer mask once we click on OK, which just means what would be a selection. A layer mask, as you're going to find out in some moments from now, is nothing but a selection in which the white parts means we're looking at the selected things, and the black parts means we're looking at things which are not selected. Since I clicked somewhere on the background, it automatically shows this as a selected part, so you're seeing this as white. But can you see also, because this is similar to his shirt that he's wearing here, this also has got selected. Let's see what will happen if I click somewhere on his blazer. If I do this, can you see this time is the opposite? The white parts are the trousers and the blazer. So this is telling us, listen, we're only, once you click on OK, these parts are going to be selected, and anything that is black is not going to be selected. So you're making the selection on the basis of color, and you are selecting that color. I can also add to the different shades of the color. So I can say, okay, I clicked here Photoshop, but listen, this, tuxedo or blazer, whatever this guy is wearing, it has more shades. So what I want to do is, I want to hit this and also add this shade. Can you see now this made it more whiter? It's taking into account those shades also. Listen, I want the tone of his face also. So I want to add this also. Now, problem will come when I say I want to add his shirt also. Now if I do it, it also adds the background because they are similar, right? So this is kind of, again, a bit of a limited tool. One thing that you can do here to improve the accuracy of your selection is to move this fuzziness slider. So it's kind of really funny that, Photoshop usually has very technical names, okay? It calls it fuzziness, okay? So fuzziness means, I'm basically, think of it similar to the tolerance thing that we did with the magic wand tool. We're telling, okay, listen, I'm giving you more leeway to include more shades than what I selected. So it starts to add more and more. If I decrease the fuzziness, I'm decreasing the tolerance to the shades that I gave it. So it's going to kind of refine our selection more. But let's say something like I wanted to select, I'm kind of happy with something like this, or maybe you can see a bit of it is selected here. So just want to stop where the background is black and only the selections are here. So if I click OK now, kind of does this. But can you see why it's not the number one tool to use? Because now what I'll have to do is, I'll have to take something like the lasso tool, hit shift, and then kind of add these things. Or maybe use the quick selection tool and add to the things. Why not just use it in the first go, right? So again, not the best tool, but sometimes it is still used, okay? You might see a situation arise later on. At least you should know that, yes, this is what this particular thing does. So out of all the tools, obviously, which one was the best? Definitely the select subject tool, because this did the job in the most automated way, okay? So when you do this, now, let's say we just want to select the subject very well, okay? Now we just need to remove this background. So what we can do is, one option is I can, like I showed you before, I can hit delete. Oops, so not this, actually, we're gonna undo this. Now we need to remove the background, right? So we need to inverse this selection. So we're going to go to select, inverse, okay? And now I can hit delete and it's going to remove that background. If I need to add another background, I can always open up, let's say I wanted to add a blue background behind this. I can always go here to the adjustment functions. I can go to solid color. And it's going to add basically a new layer on top, which is called the color fill layer, which I can fill with any color. So we're going for blue. So let's select blue. And we're going to simply pull this down because we want our selection layer to be on top. And we got a pretty good selection with just one click and one click of getting this, and the job is pretty much done. This looks good because this was an easy selection. Having said that, what we did was not the correct method to do this. There's nothing wrong with having this color fill. That's okay. We can hide this temporarily. But what we did with this particular step, deleting, should not be done, because that's a destructive way of handling a selection, because you never know when you later on might realize, listen, there's something that the selection ate, like it kind of ate from the pixels that we required, from the body. Maybe his hand, maybe his blazer, maybe his trouser, maybe his head, which I didn't notice at this particular time, but once I did zoom in, I started to notice it, okay? But now there's no way to get those pixels back because we've deleted. We pressed the delete key on the keyboard. Never ever do that in Photoshop. Okay? So what we need to do here is we're going to press undo till the time we get our selection back or even our background back. We had inversed the selection at this point. At this point, there's no problem. But now what I can do is, in fact, we don't even need this step. So I can just go back till the time we had this selection of the person. We didn't even need to inverse it. Because what we will be doing in this course is, anytime we need to get rid of this background, we're actually going to be opening up, after we've made our selection, we're going to be opening up a layer mask. So once you have your selection, if you go down here, you're going to see this option which says add layer mask and just see what happens. If we do this, can you see? You get this thing on the thumbnail here, which looks like the part that we selected is represented by white. That means he is basically represented by this white color, and anything that was outside the selection is represented by black color. What does this remind you of? Similar to what we saw, the thing with the color range tool, right? It's exactly that. So how do you say in terms of when we talk in terms of layer mask, one easy way of understanding layer masks is white reveals, black conceals. Okay, so you can see white is revealing this part wherever, so it's attached to this, right? So white part is revealing this layer, so you can see this layer, that means, right? It's revealing. Black conceals, so anything that you see in black is concealed, that means it's being temporarily deleted. I say temporarily because this is the advantage of a layer mask. Now just see, if I take a paint brush, normal brush, let's say I choose white. White is already selected here. Okay, make sure that this layer mask is selected, not this thumbnail, so that we're dealing with the layer mask. And now just see what happens. If I do this, let me zoom in because the background color was so subtle, you might not notice, but can you see, actually wherever I start painting white, it's first of all, it's painting here also. You can see here, if I do this, just notice here, can you see? So it's kind of revealing this. I'm getting that original background back. If I don't want that, I can always paint black. It's going to reveal. It's going to make it go away. I want it to come back, select white, and it's always there for me. Why? Because we never hit the delete button. This is the advantage of using a layer mask. You are doing what we call as non-destructive editing. You can always recover or delete something anytime that you want. This is why we always use a layer mask and we don't delete the pixel. Okay, I'm going to just hit a couple of undos till the time we get back to our original, which was this. And now we can do the same thing. Okay, you can go to solid color, add that blue background, pull it down. Okay, so, but now the advantage is, yes, if I notice that maybe something like this has happened when we made our selection. Okay, so let's say if I change this over to black. By the way, the shortcut for this is because oftentimes when you're working with layer masks, you might have to switch between black and white. So if you hit the X key on your keyboard, okay, it's going to switch between black and white. And if you're not seeing black and white and you want the black and white colors to come here, okay, so for example, let's say we had red here, but you okay, any color, okay. Doesn't matter because I'm selecting the layer mask here. It's showing some different color because it's dealing in shades of gray, but don't worry about that. We are not talking about that. Let's say we have some different colors, but you want black and white to quickly come here because you don't want to always open up the palette and then select black. Okay. The shortcut for that is D. So anytime you see different colors, if you press D, you get black and white. And then you can switch by using X. So D gets black and white, X to switch. Handy shortcuts to know when working with a layer mask, which means when working with selections. Start thinking of layer mask as a selection because that's exactly what it is. So now if I know that, yes, something like this had happened, okay, that I didn't notice, but I had missed something like this, then it's not a problem. I still have these pixels. I can always take the black brush and I know I need to conceal it, right? So I can always zoom in and start to paint black and remove it. Okay, or it had eaten something like this, I can always go to white. Remember, D gets black and white white is here. You can always add black. Always, whenever you do this, make sure you are on. You have selected the layer mask. Okay, you're not doing this on the subject because you start doing it on the subject, it'll actually paint that color. Okay, so we're dealing with the layer mask. And why did I just say that layer thing? Start thinking of a layer mask as a selection, because just see, if I hold down Control or Command, okay, and click here on the layer mask, it actually loads back our original selection. Whatever is in white here, that's what it loads back. So we always are also ready to get back to our selection in case we need to make some changes and see these marching ants also. This is something that we will be doing a lot. A couple of other things that you can do with the layer mask. You can hold down Alt or Option and click, and it actually turns this into the layer mask. Now you're on the canvas, you're actually seeing the layer mask. And later on, you're going to find out when we do our complex selections, this can be important because a lot of times in some selections, your naked eye may not be able to see whether something is missing or accidentally has been added in the selection. But when you look at the black and white version, if I notice that yes, there was something black here like this, but my eyes didn't notice in the colored version of the selection, then I can always come here and I know, listen, this is inside, right? This needs to be white. So I can always turn this to white and paint this back. Okay, so that's also another advantage of using a layer mask. Okay, if I again hit Alt Option, if I click on it, it takes us back to the normal view. But point is, layer masks are very important for non-destructive editing. Also, as you saw, you can load back your selection like this, and you can also see the version, like the blown up version of the layer mask, which can help you, right? So these just are some of the basics that you should know about selections before we start moving on to the more complex images from the next video onwards. Because what you're going to find out is, like I said, not every image is going to be so straightforward. In fact, in the very next image, what you're going to find out is that the number one problem comes because of slightly complex edges for which this tool will only take us so far. We will still have to refine the selection. This is the core of this course. How to refine the edges of the existing selection. And that is the process, okay, that we will start doing from the next video onward. So I hope that you got some of the basics here. I may have missed one or two things. Don't worry about that. Everything will be covered when the time is needed. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.